Here we are with the last part of, why are we the only species of human on the planet? The Earth and human. As we will start right from, we left in last video. Let's start. The last suggestion that people have made is maybe this is something about the elaborate intelligent cultural life that kind of characterizes Homo sapiens. We know that a key feature of Homo sapiens is their amazing brain capacity and their ability to think about things. For example, the sculpture of the Lion Man dates back about 40,000 years and was found in Germany, was produced by anatomically modern humans, we think, and is a really nice example. The level of sophistication of these primitives in inverted commas humans, because this is a really nice piece of artwork that has been created by somebody that we think of as being sort of very prehistoric, but it also demonstrates their ability to think in abstract thoughts, because this is something that does not exist. We don't have bipedal lions and never have as far as we know of, so this is a demonstration of a fusion of ideas, and we don't know why they made that. It's been speculated that perhaps it's some kind of religious significance or maybe for some kind of cultural purpose, but nonetheless the idea that modern humans sitting in the cave somewhere would create something that was a fusion between a human and a lion for some kind of artistic purpose, rather than as a practical tool, suggesting a level of sophistication that we have not yet seen in other species. And at the beginning of the first part, one mentioned that I wasn't going to answer my question, and I'm not, but we don't know the answer. But I am sure that your subscription of the channel motivates me, so don't hesitate to press the subscribe button if you haven't done this one-click activity. The most plausible explanation for the extinction of these other species at this stage is some complex combination of a difficult climate and maybe a pathogen and technological and cultural superiority for whatever reason, though by about 38,000 years ago. We were alone, all these other species had died out, and ever since then, as far as we know, Homo sapiens has been the only Homo species on the planet. But to end on a slightly happier note, it's not quite as straightforward as that, because in the last few years we've learned that although those other species are extinct, they have left a really exciting remnant, and we have learned that from the revolution of ancient DNA technologies, particularly driven by Son Parbo, a Swedish geneticist who spent his life really optimizing the ability to retrieve and sequence DNA from very old material, and for which he was awarded the Nobel Prize in 2022. What Pao and others have done is extract DNA, managed to extract DNA from this ancient material and sequence it, and in 2010, which was a dramatic year for this field, they came out with two really impressive findings. The first was they had successfully extracted and sequenced DNA to create a genome, a full genome sequence from Neanderthal, which was pretty revolutionary at the time, and then even more revolutionary from that, they had actually, as part of this project, been sequencing different Neanderthals material and realized that one of the pieces of material they were said was not a Neanderthal at all. In fact, was this species I've been talking to you about, the Denisovans, and this is still the first and only example of us discovering a species of Homo by DNA sequencing technology rather than by fossil identification. Once that had been done, people looked at them, at the very material, and realized there were subtle differences, but nonetheless this was the first discovery of a different species. We now have extensive genome information for both of these species. We do not sadly have it for that addition one, the Flores skeleton. That's probably because DNA is not preserved at all in the tropics, and there been attempts but no success in retrieving DNA from that sample from Indonesia. Whereas these samples come from much colder climates where the DNA is preserved better. But when we have these genome sequences from these two species together, of course, with the huge amount of genomic information we have about modern Homo sapiens, we can now make some really interesting comparisons, and the thing that was most striking as soon as this comparison was done, it shed a huge amount of light on this early diversification and spread of our species. In particular, it validated many of the dates at which Homo sapiens, modern Homo sapiens, had left and moved around Africa. The reason it did that was because of a pretty remarkable discovery, which is that when you compare those two sequences, those genomic sequences of Neanderthals and Denisovans with modern human genomes, you find that many of us living humans today, but not all, have bits of those genomes within us. You can trace your ancestry unbroken through Africa, only Africa, then you are 100% on average 100% Homo sapiens genome. If you're Eurasian, on average you're about 98% Homo sapiens. Asians carry about 2% of your genome that you've inherited from Neanderthals, and if you come from this part of the world over here, Polynesia, if you're Melanesian, you have that 2% the Neanderthal, and also up to about 4% Denisovan, and that means two really important things. First of all, it means that at a point in relatively recent evolutionary history, modern Homo sapiens did indeed cohabit areas with these two other species. The second point is it means we also interbred with them, and in fact, because we are detecting that at such high levels, we probably interbred with them quite a lot. The level of Denisovan ancestry in modern humans across the world, and what you see is it's colored from blue to red. What you see is that if you're from Africa or Europe you have essentially no Denis. Having ancestry on average, and you get more and more and more as you go across until it's peaking here at about 5% down. In this part of the world here, in one of the things. People who are familiar with this part of the world is a thing called Wallace's line. Alfred Russel Wallace, working at the same time as Darwin, spotted the fact that if you look in this part of the world, the plants and animals on one side of the line are quite different to those on the other side of the line. To get more details about Wallace's line and this concept and other lines, you can check out video of this channel, Imaginary Lines, Wallace Line, Malay Archipelago, Geology. I am pretty sure it will be a great watch. There's a very deep channel that runs here that has never dried out, and so there's been a natural barrier for a very long time, and so you have a distinct evolutionary history. But that has not affected this climb, this migration of humans, suggesting that humans successfully navigated that stretch of water between these islands, either deliberately on boats or inadvertently by being blown across on rafts of vegetation or something. This is a really nice piece of data suggesting modern humans derive from some of these crosses with ancient species, and in fact what we now believe is a model that looks a little bit like this. So around between 300 and 200,000 years ago, modern humans evolved in Africa. They migrated out, they met those Neanderthals, as I mentioned before. They didn't eradicate them all, then some horrendous genocide, and in fact, they had quite a few romantic interactions with them. We don't of course have any information on whether those were coerced interactions or consensual ones or some mixture of the two. But nonetheless, what we do have is very clear genetic information that they interbred, and that then those hybrids, for want of a better word, those Neanderthal modern human hybrids, migrated further and met this new population, this Denisovan population, and did the same thing again, introducing a new set of genes and migrating further down. Which is why we all have these slightly different ancestries, and I think the most interesting thing about this was the fact that we can see it today suggests this is probably not a very uncommon event, but actually perhaps that modern humans live side by side with these other species for a relatively extended period of time. The final piece of the puzzle that suggests that's probably really true is this. The bone fragments from that cave in Denisovan. There was very little sort of fossil material, so bone material from these individuals. This is either a leg or an arm, we don't know which, from Denisovans, and it turned out more recently that the same team's Fonta Paro's team have successfully secured DNA from this and sequenced the DNA from this. When they did that, it turns out that this individual was a first-generation hybrid, not between Homo sapiens but between Denisovan and Neanderthals, has a one Neanderthal parent and one Denisovan parent. Either we have got unbelievably lucky and found a first-generation hybrid in a sample that is absolutely tiny. This was a very common occurrence, and so you had Homo sapiens and Denisovans and Neanderthals all living close enough and interbreeding. Now, thousands of years later, a tiny bone fragment demonstrates a first-generation mixed progeny from one of these matings, suggesting perhaps that we have had this kind of interaction many times up until these other species went extinct. That suggests that actually our family tree is much more complicated than we used to think it was. Rather, this is very nice straightforward branching, and everybody else goes extinct and we're here in splendid isolation. Instead, we have these frequent interbreeding events between different lineages, some of which then go extinct but leave their genetic hallmark in modern humans. And in fact, if you're interested, you go into great detail about all the different ancestry around the world and which bits of your genome might have come from different mentioned human lineages. It's quite a fascinating dig, and so rather than thinking of human evolution as this kind of biblical pinnacle of success with a single species at the top, we're in fact much more like this really complicated branching tree with lots of cross branches, and perhaps now for this moment in time we are on our own as a species. But who knows, roll the clock on another 100,000 years, we might have all sorts of interesting diversification. I hope I have brought some new information for you about us. Once more, I am requesting a subscription at the end of this interesting series. If you want to know more about this topic, you can add a comment, or you also suggest new topic. I will definitely work on it and bring a video for you. Thanks for watching.